Welcome to Camp Podcast Piano Talk. I am pianist Migo and I serve as president of the Contemporary Art Music Project or CAMP. CAMP is an organization that promotes innovative art music and collaborates with composers and performing artists. One of many activities we do is our podcast series. Our hosts explore a wide range of topics from marginalized composers in the music history to current collaborations. Camp is currently accepting acoustic works, electroacoustic works, and installation proposals for the annual festival Campground 23. Do you want your works to be performed by the camp performing artists, to be choreographed by Tampa City Ballet, and to be displayed at Tampa-based gallery Tempest Projects? Submit your work now. Go to www.contemporaryartmusicproject.org and learn more about Campground 23. Tonight, I am your host, and I am delighted to have pianist Nic Gerpe. Hailed as magnetic and wonderfully illuminating, Nic is a champion of new music and has worked with many renowned composers. This year, he is celebrating 50th anniversary of George Crumb's Makrokosmos through playing Makrokosmos Book 1 and 12 new compositions that are response to Makrokosmos. Hi, Nic. Welcome to Piano Talk, and thank you so much for being here with me.
Hi, Inmi. Thank you so much for having me. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we usually start with a question about your background as an icebreaker. So we would like to know what was your early encounter with piano and why did you choose this profession as a professional pianist and piano teacher?
Sure. Well, when I was a kid, I should start by saying that neither of my parents are professional musicians. Um, my dad played the guitar. He still actually plays a bit, and but not as a profession. It's more like a passionate hobby for him. But we always had music at home, never really classical anything, though. I mean, my parents always would play jazz or classic rock or Motown or, I remember very distinctly Sunday mornings, it was kind of a thing for my parents to crank things like Smokey Robinson or the Temptations. So I have that association of that music with pancake breakfast on Sunday mornings kind of thing. So really, classical music was not such a big thing in our house. And honestly, I thought when I was a kid that I wanted to kind of do what my dad did and play the guitar and do rock or jazz or the fingerstyle type stuff he was working on. Um, and when I was about 7 years old, I remember very clearly sitting in the kitchen at home, and my mom was on the phone with one of her best friends, who at the time was actually going through a separation from her husband. And so they're trying in figuring out who keeps what from the house. Um, I guess she had this old upright piano at home, and she told my mom, you can have this thing for free. You just have to pay the moving fees. And so I remember my mom kind of putting her hand over the mouthpiece of the phone and looking over at me and saying, "Would you want to take piano lessons?" And I said, "Sure." And that's how that started. And so as I got older and progressed through playing, I should say my first piano teacher was primarily a jazz pianist who taught classical music. And he exposed me to a whole lot more stuff. And I got really enthusiastic about people like Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea. And again, I thought, well, this would be really cool. I'd love to play some of this stuff. And my teacher was at the time was constantly teaching me standard repertoire classical music. So I was learning about Bach and Beethoven and all the great masters and learning to play that repertoire. Um, and then I remember in high school, my dad introducing me. He said like, you like you're playing this classical music and you also like jazz. You might enjoy this. And he gave me a album of the British progressive rock band Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I don't know if you know those guys, but it was a trio consisting of Keith Emerson, who was their pianist and keyboardist, and Greg Lake, their guitarist, bassist, and vocalist, and Carl Palmer, the drummer and percussionist. And what really blew my mind about their sound was not just their original compositions. And of course, one of the really interesting things about them was, during the 70s, they were so innovative with um, working with electronics and electronic instruments and experimenting with new synthesizers like the Moog and whatnot. So aside from their original compositions, which were really, really amazing, they also did a whole lot of transcriptions of 20th century classical composers. So the first time I ever actually heard Bartok or Ginastera or Janacek was through this filter of these guys kind of electrified rock transcriptions of this music, if you can kind of imagine what that might sound like. And so I thought,
Amazing.
wow,
Amazing.
this is really cool. I want to go check out, what this Bartok, what is this all
Mm-hmm.
about? And so, I went and I listened to a whole lot of that repertoire and was just amazed. Like the first time you ever hear Bartok or Ginastera, it's like, oh my gosh. And so I decided, okay, I think this is really the music I want to be playing. And so that kind of set me on this trajectory towards pursuing contemporary classical music. It was a very sort of roundabout way of getting there, but I got there eventually.
Yes, that's very interesting and a fun way to get into that word, really. But you got your degree from USC,
That's right.
um, and you had this classical training to become a pianist. And were there any particular styles that you really enjoyed learning and performing, or composers? Of course, you talked about Bartok, Ginastera, and Janacek, but um, are there any other?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, as much as I play and specialize in contemporary repertoire, I mean, I still love playing standard rep. And I should say, when I entered USC, um, I told my teacher that, my goal was that I really wanted to pursue contemporary repertoire, and she was super, super, super supportive of that
Mm-hmm,
and wanted to really help me with that. But she also said, at the same time, you need to be equally proficient in playing all of the styles. Um,
mm-hmm,
I remember very clearly on many occasions, having discussions about how being really good at doing the one thing is great, but actually, if you're really well rounded and you're able to play beautifully in all of the styles, really all of these composers and all of these styles help you play better in the other styles. Um, and, the thing to remember too is that at some point, all of these composers were the new music, right?
oh
So
yes.
I always kind of think about that. As far as specific composers, I particularly love Haydn, actually. One of my favorite pieces that I played were the F minor variations. It's
Oh
such a cool piece, and
yes.
so just such a unique kind of sound.
Mm-hmm,
Of course, the sonatas are fantastic. Um, I really rather enjoyed playing Liszt pieces. The St. Francis Legends
yeah.
were really, they're great pieces, and in a lot of ways, those pieces and some of the the Years of Pilgrimage are kind of like these proto-impressionist pieces. So those are really fantastic. But oh no, there's plenty of the standard repertoire that it would take me forever to list kind of my favorite pieces or composers.
Absolutely, there are way too many composers for piano, I think, and that's Manowski. Métopes that you played was really imaginative, beautiful, colorful piece, really beautifully played. And so I want to know that you had any particular reason to who programmed this work, and my assumption is that. That you also played the Juhi Bansal's piece in the same concert.
That's
So,
right. Yeah.
yeah, I assume there's some kind of theme or some ideas going on there.
Yeah. So the Szymanowski, the Métopes, he was a really interesting composer. He's very much a contemporary of Ravel, and definitely you can hear in his music influence of Scriabin and the Impressionists. Debussy and Ravel, of course. And what was interesting about him is he had these kind of several different compositional periods. Like his earliest music is this very, very, very um, late hyper romantic kind of sound. And then he has this middle style that's very much in this sort of impressionist vein with his own very unique sound world. And that's where the Métopes fall. They're kind of in the 19 teens when he was really, really, really interested in Greek mythology, particularly, and no, he traveled throughout the Mediterranean. And then in his later period, he got really interested in the folk music of Poland, and so he wrote this, pieces like the mazurkas for piano in this later style, and really assimilated the Polish folk music. But anyway, these Métopes, these are one of these pieces where I was probably on some scavenger hunt in the music library as an undergrad, and I found them and thought, well, these would be really cool to play when I grow up, when I can actually play them, because they're, among other things, ferociously difficult. And I had always wanted to perform these pieces. And so for this particular recital, which was in 2015, Pianospheres asked me to be a part of their. Pianospheres, I should mention, is an organization in Los Angeles dedicated to contemporary piano music. And they started with 4 core pianists and have been performing for many years. And starting in 2015, they started this satellite series where they started inviting younger artists to put on recitals. So they invited me to play. And so the theme of this particular recital actually goes back to the Crumb Makrokosmos, which one of the poetic lines that he talks about being an influence on that piece is from the French mathematician and poet Pascal, who said, "The eternal silence of infinite space terrifies me." And this idea of infinite spaces and boundlessness kind of stuck with me. And so I thought, these Szymanowski pieces are based on the Odyssey by Homer, and this idea of journeying to these far off places. And in particular, these 3 movements are each based on female characters that Odysseus encounters. And so it kind of fit in with the overall theme of the recital, on which I also played the Makrokosmos, and I also played a piece by a modern Canadian composer named Alexina Louis, a piece called "I Leap Through the Sky with Stars." And then Juhi wrote me this piece, "Land of Waking Dreams," which was inspired by a backpacking trip that we took to southern Utah. So all of the pieces kind of had this sort of cosmic boundlessness
Hmm.
theme going on.
Fantastic. Well, let's listen to Métopes, Opus 29 for solo piano by Szymanowski and performed by Nic Gerpe. So now you have this amazing project this year, Makrokosmos 50, and it's not only the presentation of Makrokosmos, but also there are these 12 new works that are answering to or responding to the Makrokosmos. How did you come up with this project?
Well, this piece in particular, and Crumb's music in general, has been really special to me for a long time. Um, I think, as far as you probably have had these experiences too, where a certain composer's music or a certain artist's performance really just inspire you and kind of make you feel like, wow, this really has given me some kind of direction, or kind of opened my mind to the possibilities of what music can be like. And for me, the first time I encountered Crumb's music was really like that. Um, I'd never heard anything like it. It's a combination of the way that he uses all these novel sounds and really creates such an incredible sound world with all of these extended techniques, but also the really spiritual dimension often of the works, and compositionally they're so fascinating and so elegant. I think the first Crumb piece I ever heard was the trio for cello, piano, and flute, The Voice of the Whale. And it's kind of like, the first time you hear something like that, it just completely blows your mind. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was just so incredible. And so I just had to play his music. And, of course, I made it a mission to play that piece. But the first piece for solo piano that I did was his Little Suite for Christmas, the seven movements based on the Giotto frescoes, and got really into this extended techniques and really expanding the palette of piano sounds that are available. And at USC, one of the professors, Stuart Gordon, he actually is a total master at playing the Makrokosmos, and I had heard him do it in a recital one year. And so when I was doing my DMA at USC, we have to do a lecture recital as performance majors. And I told my teacher, Bernadine Blaha, I said, I really want to do Makrokosmos Volume 1. Like, that would be a really great piece for a lecture recital. And she said, well, that's terrific. You should go study that with Stuart Gordon. And so I had that opportunity to go study this piece with him. And what was really amazing about that is, not only is he an incredible master at this piece, but he also studied the piece himself with David Burge, who, of course, the piece was initially written for. So there was this extra special connection with the piece. So I did that for my lecture recital at USC, and then I've played the piece a couple of times since then. And I had it kind of in my mind recently to record that piece, and thought this would be a really great way to kind of celebrate and commemorate this incredible work, to have 12 people write these response movements to the original, right?
Yeah, that's. I mean, I think it's a one thing that that's such probably the most important work I think in for piano in 20th century piano literature, and it's quite undertaking to learn the whole book. I tried actually, and I'm still learning. Haven't completed yet, but I think what's really amazing is this. This 12 new pieces that are also very unique, and you also had your own composition in there.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tell us about that. That will be really great.
Well, sure. So when I first approached the other 11 composers with this idea, first of all, I was really just blown away with how enthusiastic they were. I
Hmm.
kind of explained, here's my idea with this project, and without exception, they were all just completely into it. They just thought it was fantastic. And so basically, a couple of them asked me, so what kind of piece do you want? And I said, I really didn't want to give them too many parameters. I wanted it to be you get to choose which movement you want to do. And of course, as people are claiming the individual movements, you kind of just you know mark them off that so and so is doing movement 4 and so is doing movement 6, so there's no repetitions. um, but basically I just gave the guidelines of, well, it's got to be between 2 and 3 minutes, because I wanted the new cycle to be roughly the same duration as the old cycle, which is about 34 minutes. And I said, you can use any of the extended techniques, particularly the ones that Crumb uses. I even gave the option of using fixed media electronics, and one composer on the project took me up on that particular offer, which was pretty cool. Um, but other than that, I wanted it to be kind of a free response. The pieces themselves are so loaded with extra musical associations. I mean, Crumb has these two lines of poetry from Pascal and Rilke that form the inspiration for the piece. There's also, the piece's title, Makrokosmos, is an allusion to a big influence of his, Bartok. He talks about the format of the piece, these 12 fantasy pieces on the signs of the zodiac, being reflective of his admiration for Debussy and Debussy's preludes. He talks about Schumann and Chopin being influences on the pieces. He dedicates every movement to a different friend or colleague born under these different zodiac signs. Um, of course, there's all of these, really interesting compositional things throughout the piece. The cyclicism in the work, these different chords or harmonic patterns that appear in the various movements and kind of provide unity and continuity throughout. So there's a lot of stuff to grab onto there. And so everybody approached it in really unique and different ways. And so my thought was, I took the fifth movement, which is the Phantom Gondolier, the Scorpio movement. And Crumb dedicates that movement to himself in the original, because he was a Scorpio. And it so happens that, I mentioned Keith Emerson earlier in our chat, that Keith Emerson was also a Scorpio. And so I had this idea to make my movement a musical dialogue sort of between Crumb and Keith Emerson. Kind of imagine, what would that be like? So the piece is pretty virtuosic, and a lot of mixed meter things, and it's very fun to play. Um, it uses some of the inside the piano techniques a la Crumb. There are a couple of little hidden allusions in there to these harmonic progressions that Crumb uses, but really my big idea was to sort of celebrate these two great musical Scorpios who had this profound influence on me personally. And in some way, I think that really reflects a lot of the spirit of the larger work anyway. And I've been thinking quite a lot recently over the last year and a half of the people who throughout our lives really inspire us or give us direction, or um, in some way, shape, or form uh, influence the direction that our lives take. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Great. I mean, I've just read this really glorious review of your performance. So congratulations, and that's
Thank
just
you.
really huge. And you have this dedicated website,
Mhm.
Makrokosmos 50, so we can always go and check out and what's new and what's upcoming performances and recordings and all that. So yeah, we'll keep our ears and eyes open for that, for sure. Um, well, I usually ask all my guests this question because I feel that it's very, very important. Do you have any advice for the younger generation of pianists, especially, exploring new repertoire and new piano music? And I believe that there are tons of great pianists who can play, Liszt B minor sonata and, of course, Rachmaninoff sonatas and concertos and all those big works. But I think we are going towards a new path actually, and there are also a lot of pianists who are doing uh, different things and new things. So, if you have any advice, that will be great.
Yeah, I mean, I would say to always be inquisitive. Number one is to go to as many concerts as you can and go see what's out there happening right now and find the composers whose music really speaks to you and go check out underrepresented composers or just the things that you really don't know because that can lead you down some really exciting and interesting paths and be willing to be adventurous and go explore and find what really speaks to you. The other thing I would say is don't be don't be afraid to take risks artistically, as far as your programming, as far as the music that you want to play. If you have some kind of vision, some kind of project, some kind of repertoire piece that really speaks to you, then go for it and really make it yours. And the other thing I would say is just to emphasize sort of the importance of collaboration and really you know get out there and work with composers, get out there and work with other players who are wanting to bring new music to life and think up interesting collaborative efforts and projects that you can do with all of these different performers or composers.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that you work with so many composers, and we're gonna listen to one of the piece in the project, Juhi Bansal's "Through Cracked Mirrors." Maybe you can share with us about this piece.
Sure. So she wrote the response to the 11th movement in Makrokosmos 1, which that's the Gemini movement and what Crumb calls dream images, and he um, subtitles it Love Death Music. And it's, I think, probably of the set, one of the more famous movements. It's the one where
Mm-hmm.
he has that extended quote of the Chopin Fantasy Impromptu that
Mm-hmm.
sort of weaves in and out of the texture. It's like the ghost of Chopin sort of comes for a visit.
Mm-hmm.
I've always really loved that movement. It has this feeling of like reaching out and trying to connect with somebody who's passed, who's gone, and it's a very very spiritual kind of movement. So Juhi took this particular movement, and the way that she explained it to me was, you know, the original Crumb is like Chopin through the filter of Crumb. And so her idea was, okay, what would Crumb be like through the filter of Chopin? And so a lot of the new piece has a lot of these very Chopinesque kind of figurations, and particularly like the virtuosic elements of the writing. These you know very rapid arpeggiated left hand patterns, and just there are a lot of very kind of Chopin-esque gestures, but utilizing Crumb harmonies. And I'm probably, I can never speak as eloquently about the composer's music as they can, of course, but that's kind of where the title comes from. Is if the original is reflecting Chopin through Crumb's lens, then the new one is the opposite.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Um, well, thank you so much for talking to me and about your project and about your music. Was really great, and personally I love the project and I think it's really fantastic. um, so many congratulations, and I think we can wrap up, and well, let's say bye for now. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much again for having me. It's just been wonderful to have this opportunity to chat with you.
Of course. And let's listen to what we just talked about, Makrokosmos, Movement 11 from Book 1, Dream Images, and the responding piece, Juhi Bansal's Through Cracked Mirrors. Support us by donating. You can go to our website www.contemporaryartmusicproject.org and simply click the donate button. Help us continue our podcast, festival, and other exciting projects. Thank you for listening. I will see you next time with more piano music.